Welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast with your host, Alvin Bonds II. Join us each week as Alvin explores the relationship between leadership and families by interviewing leaders in different fields all over the world. Alvin believes that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families.
Hello, and welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast. I am your host, Alvin Bonds II, and this is episode 15. Today, I interview Cherie Aimée. Cherie has a remarkable story that you want to hear. So let's jump right in. Cherie, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Tell us about you. Introduce yourself to someone who may not know your story.
Yes. So that's always the tricky part, is figuring out how to summarize what happened to me.
Yeah.
But for those of you that are new, hello, my name is Cherie Aimée. I'm actually a near-death survivor. I'm an international speaker. I write for a major media platform called Influencive.com. And I am a former tech programmer that was running a successful digital marketing and branding tech firm. And at the height of my success several years ago, and unfortunately, I had a major life tragedy. And this tragedy basically took me through cancer, and then later on, even after I was cancer-free, took me through cardiac arrest. So my story gets media attention just because what happened to me was literally like a 1 in a million chance. The doctors couldn't resuscitate me for well over 90 minutes. I had to be transferred to a different hospital, really with no heartbeat at all, just life-saving equipment that just continued to feed oxygen to the rest of my organs without any kind of heartbeat. And by a slight miracle, I survived after about 3 to 4 months. And who I became out of that experience took me on a journey, a real dark night of the soul journey, through facing my own mortality, through facing the fears and the judgment. It took me on a journey from the height of my success through the emotional and physical turmoil of the ultimate losing it all. And then finding the strength at the very, very bottom of it all, which was really when I found myself fighting for my life on life support. And that's when I'll never forget. I laid there in the hospital bed, unable to move. I couldn't actually talk because I was hooked up to a ventilator. I was hooked up to a bionic heart because my own heart wasn't beating. So I was the ultimate case. I had surgeons from all around the world fighting to save my life. I ended up shattering multiple medical records. And through that process, I spent 5 years on a portable version of this bionic heart. And then I ultimately received the gift of life through heart transplant. So you're seeing me now, anybody that sees me now on social media, you're seeing me literally coming off the heels of everything I've just shared. And what I did with that tragedy was I had two choices. I really could continue sitting on the edge of my bed, bawling my eyeballs out, saying, why did this happen to me? Yeah. Feeling broken, feeling sorry for myself. And believe it or not, I did. Yeah. I did, as I'm sure you guys can imagine. And there was a certain point where I said to myself, you know what, Cherie? You just had a heart transplant. Things are going well now. You can continue to play this victim role, or you can utilize the strength that you held on to during all those months on life support. And you can find one more ounce of strength. I always say this to myself every time some obstacle or some tragedy happens and rips the rug out from under my feet. I say, Cherie, you can do it. You can muster the strength in you. And that's what I did. After my heart transplant, I turned to social media. I created a powerful brand platform, just sharing my story, really not having any idea of what the business would be. And, lo and behold, now, you're talking to me about 3 years later, and I've really built a brand, personal brand leadership platform that allows me to use my voice to not only share my story and heal from my tragedy, but to really help inspire others that are going through tough times as well. So really what I do now is I do a lot of writing, like I said, on media outlets. I do public speaking. I've traveled to places like Italy and Indonesia. I've spoken in front of 300 top world-renowned surgeons, cardiac thoracic surgeons, and medical professionals in the world as a keynote speaker. I'm speaking in front of a room full of military veterans next month. And, my role model has always been somebody like Oprah, right? I mean, who doesn't have her as their role model? But for me, she was something really special. And I've been following her and listening to her, watching her show since I was little. And I never saw myself on TV. I never saw myself in front of the stage speaking in front of people. I always had stage fright and fear of cameras. And this tragedy really turned me into a whole new person. I thought I was successful before with my company. I didn't even have an idea of what success meant until the day I died and had to find a way to rebuild my life. So it's really an honor, Alvin, to be speaking with you and your audience today. However I can bring value to you guys about really coming out of tragedy, stepping into that power of resilience, which we all have. And, the way I reignited my life was I redefined my life. I wrote a new chapter, in fact, I wrote a new book. And so whatever questions you have for me regarding my story or how I can help inspire your audience to just go out there and create what it is they're meant to create, because there is no time like the present moment.
Well, Cherie, it's an honor for me to have you on our podcast, and your story is so powerful. It's completely breathtaking. And what keeps you grounded? You literally died and came back to life. What keeps you grounded?
As soon as you ask that question, immediately the word nature, I'm immediately taken back to the beach or the lake. For me, it's definitely my connection with nature. It's really what got me through, even when I was on life support. Thank God the hospital knows enough that if they can, I have to stress, they will try as hard as they can. If you are really in a dire situation like I was, they will try as hard as they can to room you next to a window if they can. Mm-hmm. And I was blessed enough to actually have a room during a lot of my different stages of recovering within the hospital that was I was in New York City, and it was right across from the Hudson River. Ever since those fighting days, like, am I going to make it another day? I would just turn my head. That was all I could turn. I would just stare out at the water, at the ocean, and I would just dream. And, even when I was in the ICU section that didn't have access to a window with, a nice view, I would actually have them bring in like a pail of water. And I would just close my eyes while the nurses or my family would hold this bucket of water. And I would just dip my fingers in. And I would close my eyes and I would pretend I was at the lake. And that, right? And that it was my toes. Because nature makes me feel really expansive. Yeah. And it makes me feel like my current problems just dissolve into the vastness that is this world that we live in, right? And there's just something so grounding about being in nature. So whenever I can, even to this day now, when it comes to challenges in business or just keeping myself grounded as a preventative, so I don't get overly stressed or whatever, I actually spend every single day either out in nature or sitting by the beach or by the lake if you have access to that. But even if it's just sitting by a tree or just, putting your feet in grass for a few minutes a day. It really does a lot to ground your energy, and it really helps reduce stress in life. So a lot of times, whenever we have big obstacles or we're confused at decisions to make in life, if it's our business or with family or with our marriage, when you can ground yourself, you're in a better place to make better decisions for yourself. If you're making them from a place of calmness, or at least as calm and stress-free as you can get yourself in order to know what the next best decision for you is.
Yeah. Wow. That is so inspirational. And it's something that any of us can use in any situation. I love that. I'm interested in knowing how did you discover this about yourself?
I've actually been, ever since I was little, I was always somebody that spent, a lot of times outdoors. And obviously this was before smartphones and all this stuff. So, I was used to just growing up out in nature. And I always felt so free. I always just felt so free. And I always felt a deeper connection to a bigger world. So, even I think naturally, without really thinking about it, I think I just always had a very broad mind that allowed me to kind of escape out of my body and just visualize myself in a bigger dream, a bigger world, a bigger vision for myself. And sometimes maybe out of our childhood, that's a way to escape certain things.
Sure.
Other times it could just be that's we start to realize that we're just happiest when we're outside. And so I think it's just something that as I've gotten older, I've learned whenever I was challenged, when I sat out in the sun or I could feel the breeze, on my skin, I always felt safe, and I think that's really the core of it all, is that when we are in the midst of struggle or strife, and we don't know what to do, and we don't know if we're going to make it another day, and I'm not just talking about a physical issue, sometimes emotionally.
Yeah.
There's been times in my life where emotionally I'm like, am I going to survive tomorrow? I mean, that's how much our minds can play with us.
Yes.
And I think it's just been a natural progression that on my own, I've figured out for myself that that's what's worked. And a lot of times when I suggest this to other people, to just, find it sounds crazy, but find your happy place.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is, when you can find a place that just makes you happy and feel safe, right? So even if it's not nature, some people don't feel safe in nature.
Sure.
But if you can find even a room in your house that just, when you close your eyes, you don't feel clutter, you don't feel stress, or if it's in the public library, away from your kids for 5 minutes or whatever it is. It's so critical to find a few minutes of your day every single day to be able to allow your body to adjust that, okay, we're going in to sit by this one little table at the library for 10 minutes every single day. Your body, your mind, your soul will become accustomed to that becomes a trigger that sends this response to your body saying, now you can relax.
Yes.
So I think what so many of us do is we hold off until our vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or we hold off until the weekend. Or we say, I'm going to take a day off next week.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? The stress you're under today is affecting every choice, every decision, every emotion that you experience in this moment, which is, in fact, affecting your future. While somebody like me finds it so critical at this point, because it literally saved my life, I will go to the beach and do work, or sit by the lake, or sit by a tree and find a way to do an hour of work, or maybe more, maybe less if I'm like, oh, I don't have that much time.
Yeah.
But I start with people by saying, take 5 to 10 minutes. If you're at work all day, go outside. If you don't have a company, park or whatever, just step outside and get some fresh air. Pick a time and do it that same day, at that same time every day, because like I said, your body will sense that as a trigger to relax. And you'd be surprised how much 5 to 10 minutes a day will actually help you with your productivity, your health, your vibrancy, energy, and with your decision making. It's critical.
That is so powerful. One of the things that I do daily is practice what you're saying, and as a therapist, I have opportunity to educate and train other people in this powerfulness of being mindful and being present.
Yes, absolutely. It really is life changing. And, for anybody that's, and I know, like, again, our minds can automatically come up with the reasons why, but I don't live near a lake or this. I want to tell everybody that, like I said, I did it in the ICU with a bucket of water. I will do it in the shower. So many times we think of the shower as just let's get in and get out. But what if you started training yourself that those 5-10 minutes in the shower are your time to really tune in, feel the water, meditate a little bit with the water. That's your quiet time in the shower.
Yeah.
What if you're at work? I remember, I worked in advertising, a very, very stressful industry. I was on the tech side, but it was still advertising, in the midst of branding and marketing and just multi-million-dollar clients, lots of stress, going to bed at 3 a.m. every night. And I remember I would just naturally go into the bathroom and I would turn on the water and I'd put it on warm because I needed a break from everyone. Mm-hmm. And I would put my hands under the water and I would close my eyes and I would just listen to, and pretend it was like a waterfall. And I would do that for just a few minutes and just take in that time. And then I would go back to my desk. And that's how simple it can be. Yeah. So really, wherever you are, there are, ways that you can learn and integrate mindfulness into your daily schedule.
And, Cherie, prior to your near-death experience, you had begun your career and had created a life for yourself. And after your near-death experience, things began to launch. Tell us about your philosophy of leadership.
My philosophy of leadership is really, it's all about, I have 5 core values that it's 6 now. I added one more. But it's really, it's ethics, it's integrity, it's loyalty, community, love, and innovation. And I think those 6 core values really describe who I am at my core and how I have stepped into my power, my own personal power in life. And I lead from a place of personal power.
Yes.
I lead from a place that's compassionate, that's loving, right? I am a big, sometimes online I feel like a watchdog because I'm very sensitive to ethical teaching and ethical leadership. And when I don't see it, it brings out the watchdog in me, I have 2 sides of me. I have this really loving, nurturing side, very sweet, very kind, very loving. Then there's this other side that, it commands respect in a way that it's not forced, but it's to also let people know I'm not a pushover. There are core values, that as a human on this planet, we should respect.
Yes.
And that I don't need to compromise being a mindful, kind, and loving person by being somebody that pretends there isn't another energy involved around us every day that doesn't feel so good. If that makes any sense. Because a lot of times people, when they talk about mindfulness and positivity and whatever, they think that it also means you can be walked all over. But we can have boundaries in life. Yeah. We can set boundaries for ourselves. And I think it starts with us. So my leadership is less from a place of you need to do this and you need to set boundaries and you need to do this. I can talk about all that, but I like to lead by example. And I'm a very expressive example. And a lot of my tribe, my community learns from my actions. And I really think that is the powerful stance on leadership that I think resonates with me the most, because a lot of times when even the thought of suggesting something new to somebody can cause them to trigger their own hurts, their own wounds, and they block off. They'll block you off. They won't listen to what you're saying. They may nod, right? But they won't actually implement it for themselves because their own wounds are trying to protect them from introducing something new that's unknown. Yeah. It's scary. So I understand all of that. I do not have, the experience that you do, but I think from personal experience, I know what has stopped me before from really stepping into leadership. As much as I did well in my career, I have to be honest and say, I still never saw myself as a leader at all, at all. And that's because leadership really comes from within. The kind of leadership I'm talking about comes from within your soul. Yes. And it's who you are and who you, how you show up in the world. And I think everybody has the capacity to be a leader. We all have a capacity to inspire somebody else in our lives. And we can learn from those we admire, our idols, influencers. We can learn from those people. But I think it's a mistake to always put these people on such a pedestal that we never learn the power of our own self-worth and our own ability to have just as much of an impact on somebody else's life. And it's such a powerful place to be. And now that I'm stepping into that place for the first time and knowing it's a journey of growth. Yeah. Leadership is a journey of growth. It's not just, okay, I'm there. It's a journey, but it's a journey I have said yes to. And I think my hopes is that if I can inspire more people to just say yes, just say yes, own their worth, own their power, then I've done my role here on earth.
And there's so many people who need that. They need that inspiration. They need that perspective or that reminder that, yes, you have value. Yes, you have worth. I love that. I love it.
Yes, absolutely. It's critical. And that self-worth really is, I can see now in hindsight, that really was just the core of so many things, so many situations I got myself into, growing up, or, people taking advantage of me, or any of that. It all stems down to self-worth. And even going through health tragedies such as cancer and then this cardiac arrest, the way I initially responded to that was through my lack of self-worth. And let me tell you, that's not what helps you fight through a health tragedy. it was coming into my power that helped me to get through the unknown. Will I survive or won't I? At the end of the day, it ended up where it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Now, to everybody else, they were freak out if I started saying that.
Yes.
Right? Because I remember my own mother being like, what, you're not going to fight? But she didn't understand. It was a place of letting go.
Yeah.
And finding peace in the moment. In every moment. And that's a big message I even want to be able to bring to, health communities. Mm-hmm. And I'm just starting to do that right now with actually the hospital that saved my life. And it's so critical. That's how I made it through every day of cancer. That's how I made it through every day of heart failure. It was by going within and finding that place of peace inside my soul, that no matter what happens, I'm still okay. In this moment, I'm okay. Yeah. And I still do that to this day. So, yeah.
You talked about flatlining in your husband's arms. I can only imagine what that was like for him and for your whole family going through this journey with you. Tell us about your support system, your family. How do they see you?
Yeah, my support system, it's complicated. It's definitely complicated. And I'm not going to paint it as a rosy picture. My husband has been there from day one, holding my hand every step of the way, being by my hospital bedside every step of the way. My family was definitely there for me as well, but it was a little more complicated. What I learned through, two massive health crises is that as much as we all want to know that we will truly be there in every way possible for somebody that's going through a chronic illness, until you're in it, you don't know how the people around you will react. Yeah. And without getting into all the details of how it all unfolded, because I saw a trend between the first illness and then the second illness. So I definitely saw this trend. But what I can say is when you're really dealing with, illnesses such as cancer, the C word, that in itself has its own stigma around it. Mm-hmm. I even had family members that, to this day, close family members, to this day, do not believe I had cancer. Wow. So what that emotionally does to a cancer patient is indescribable. Indescribable. I felt so much shame because the way they dealt with it was through their own fears and confusion. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that it started off by saying, no, you don't have cancer. And then it led to, you caused your cancer by getting a biopsy. And now it's back to, you never had cancer. Mm-hmm. And when I first heard that, when I was diagnosed, the shame was so real that when my husband drove me home that day, after hearing it, I sat in the car and I literally went out of my body and I was crying so hard. And my husband was driving and I was literally about to open the door and throw myself out. The shame was so thick that I could not think straight. That somebody had told me I had caused my cancer by doing what the doctor said, by getting the biopsy and sticking that needle in my chest. The shame, there's no words. I can't even describe the dark hole I went into on that ride home. Mm-hmm. And then now to hear that after 6 months of intense chemotherapy, 4 drugs, that I didn't, it was, the side effects were so bad I didn't know if I would survive. And to now hear, the same person saying, well, we really don't know that she had cancer. I've had to do a lot of work, a lot of work since my tragedy to come back into a place of wholeness where I am completely and 100% comfortable with every decision I've ever made in my life and every decision I still make every single day. That is the power that I possess now.
Yes.
Where you cannot possibly make me feel shame at this point after what I've been through. You can't possibly do that. That level of strength and no longer worrying about what other people around you are thinking, even those by blood, that to me is true freedom, because it's no longer reliant on what's around me, what people are saying, or any results that I get in life, good or bad. I've achieved a lot of successes since my transplant, and I am the same exact person. No amount of success or failures will shake that core of me. Why? Because it is my main priority every day that I wake up, that I tune in and do exactly what we talked about in the beginning.
Yes.
Coming back into alignment, going into nature, finding my happy place, finding my center, finding my peace, because that's where nothing out of alignment can rock me. And coming back into leadership again, that is the place of power that I lead. So, it's a journey, Alvin, which, I know you know.
Yeah.
It's a journey that you have to allow yourself that space to get there. I didn't get here overnight. This has been my whole life's journey. And the catalyst was a 7-year journey to fight for my life. But every day is a new day to redefine your life, right?
Yeah.
So, I really, for anybody that has, people around them or just circumstances that don't feel supportive, I never thought I could make it through life without my core family right there by my side, like my blood family. I never thought that. It was my biggest fear in life. And I ended up going through the transplant with nobody but my husband. Nobody. I had thankfully a few friends that showed up to help with Reiki and that level of stuff in the hospital, which, forever grateful, because it was scary.
Yeah.
But I got a whole new heart, Alvin. A whole new heart without my family by my side.
Yeah.
And when I did that, I knew I could do anything.
Yes.
I was free. It's powerful.
Cherie, what would you say to someone who they may not be in a similar situation as you, as life or death physically, but as you mentioned before, emotionally they may be? What is the first step they should do in order to regain their strength and to know who they are?
Yeah, I think if you're really in a dark place, a lonely place, what really, one of the key things that really helped me when I was at my lowest was I did eventually reach out to a support group. I did also get therapy, So sometimes people are, embarrassed or ashamed to see a therapist. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I did not get here alone at all. So while, everything I've shared have been things that I've implemented and things that you can implement by yourself, I did not get here by myself. I've had different therapists along the way. Sometimes, I reach a certain point of growth and then I actually need another type of guide to help me through another section, so there's no shame and reaching for somebody else at different stages. So, you never have to feel like you're stuck or that there's no hope. That's one thing I've learned is there's always hope. So my first suggestion is what I did, and that is that I've reached out for help. So you can reach out for help through maybe a friend you can trust, a family member if you have one that you can trust. It doesn't have to be family. It can definitely be a therapist, so you can check with your health insurance to see who's covered under your plans. But then there's also free support groups. So you can definitely do a search in the area. For me, I was able to find support groups for, cancer, but there's also support groups. If you're an entrepreneur, there's entrepreneurial free support groups. You can look through meetup.com and maybe find some support groups. I know tons of people use meetup.com. I'm sure, Alvin, you've got a bunch of suggestions for people as well. But I'm somebody where, I even found support joining a yoga group.
Yeah.
Right? So that's really helpful. Getting into some type of, sports activity. Maybe it's not yoga. Maybe it's, something else. But again, if you're not at that place of, feeling like you really can do something very social like that, even just a quiet support group, for whatever it is you're going through. I promise you, there are so many support groups out there now that there are ones for just about everybody. And the key with that is don't feel like you don't have the freedom to try out different groups and see which ones you like. There's some that I don't resonate with at all. But it's great because I tried it out. I assessed what things I didn't like in order to be able to find ones that did feel good to me. Yeah. So those are, definitely key parts of my life. There's still parts of my life. It's a little harder for me right now, I think, with therapy. I would love to find a therapist right now, but it's a little hard for me right now because a lot of therapists hear my story and then they're like, I don't know what to do with her. So, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like I've got other resources now and I'm in a good place. So, I've got such a massive support system now. I've got hospital support. Yeah. I've got my husband's an amazing support. I've got new friends now that are supports. I really changed my whole life. I started off in a dark place, surrounded by certain friends, surrounded by certain family members. And what I learned was a lot of that darkness, a lot of that struggle wasn't even mine. It really wasn't even mine. It was just other people's perception of how they wanted my life to be, how I should live this, what kind of career I should have, what kind of person I should marry. I mean, right? That was a big thing. Right? And it's like, once I started to get out there, and even just starting off with a cancer support group, I started connecting with people. And then now I'm in groups that have to do with, more entrepreneurship and branding and stuff like that. And so there's people I can trust now. And you realize that you start to thrive when you're around, when you finally experimented enough to find the people that resonate with you. Who I am now, I feel like myself now. I feel like the Cherie that I have been since I was a little kid, free to play, free to experiment, right? Free to talk, free to share my voice. And yet most of my life, somehow the world just started putting me more and more into this box where I felt like I was in a dark hole. And it wasn't even me. Sometimes we think, oh, it's us. There's something wrong with us. Sometimes it's not even you. Yeah. It's just your surroundings. So, there's so much hope. I really want everybody listening to understand that when I tell you there is hope, I mean it. I mean it. I mean it. I wanted to throw myself out of the car from shame. I didn't feel worthy of existing anymore in that moment. And when you can find the right people, when you can take the baby steps, I promise you in time, you will start to develop that core strength. You will start to know who are the people that make you feel good about being alive. That's so critical, Alvin. That's so critical. To be able to say, I feel good about myself for being alive. Gosh, I mean, looking back on that, I never could have just screamed that from the top of my lungs.
Yeah.
None of us know what each day is going to bring. And yet I can still say that.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony is, that's why I can still say that.
Yes, yes.
You know what I mean? Because I know that I just have this day, and because I'm now surrounded by people who finally appreciate me, finally get me, finally allow me to be the creative, beautiful, powerful soul that I and all of you are, now I can be grateful. Now I can truly appreciate the gratitude of just a breath in each and every day, no matter what is falling apart around me. So really, that first step is to know that you don't have to do this alone. And I promise everybody can get to this place of strength. Yeah. But you've got to be willing to take that first step.
Well, Cherie, I just appreciate you taking the time for this interview. If someone wanted to, read one of your books or book you for a keynote speaking engagement, where would they go to contact you?
Absolutely. And I would love that. And I'd love to reach out, and feel free to connect with me. You can go to my website. It's CherieAimée.com. That's CherieAimee.com. If you go there, you will see links to all my social media. I'm extremely active on social media, you guys, especially Twitter. So if you reach out to me because you heard this message, you heard this podcast with Alvin, write me and just say, oh, hey, I heard you on Alvin's podcast. So I know, and I will make sure that I reach back out to you guys. But yeah, there's also a contact form on my website if you'd like me to come speak at your event, if you're a school, a business, whatever industry you're in. My message really does touch a lot of different people. So like I said, I'm going to be speaking with veterans next month. I've spoken to surgeons. I've spoken to entrepreneurs. So I just love it. Speaking is my favorite thing, as you could probably tell here. But I love being able to share inspiration and hope with other people. So definitely check out, again, CherieAimée.com. You can also read some of my inspirational articles on Influencive.com. So that's where you can also read some of my articles on resilience and stuff like that. But you can find everything if you just go to my website. So I would love to connect with all of you. Alvin, thank you. I really loved this interview.
Well, thank you so much, Cherie. It is truly, you touched my heart today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, as well as providing a rating and review. Every week, I will interview a different leader and invite them to share with us their views and perspective on the relationship between leadership and family. Be sure to visit my website. It's www.alvinbonds2nd.com. That's ALVINBONDSII.com. Have a great day.